Welcome back everybody, my name's Nick930 and this is my review for the PC version of Wolfenstein Youngblood. Wolfenstein Youngblood is a semi-open world cooperative first-person shooter, created by both Machine Games and series newcomers Arkane Studios. Thanks to this new collaboration, Youngblood features a drastically different style and feel than the past few entries in the series, including more open-ended environments, new RPG-esque design elements, and a new cast of characters. But underneath this fresh coat of paint, there still remains the same excellent gunplay, tight controls, and unapologetic, brutal Nazi-killing action that has made the series such a hit. And adding in the ability to play the entire experience cooperatively with a friend only further adds to the fun. But first, let's talk about the game's narrative. Wolfenstein Youngblood takes place 20 years after Wolfenstein 2, with America finally secured from Nazi rule, and the world slowly being pieced back together. BJ Blazkowicz, the protagonist of every Wolfenstein game prior, settles down with his wife Anya in a small rural town, where they raise their twin daughters Zofia and Jess and teach them how to survive in this brutal new Nazi-controlled world. However, after BJ mysteriously goes missing, both his daughters spring into action and begin searching his last known location in Nazi-occupied Paris. The twins, along with their young friend Abby, then proceed to work alongside the French resistance in the area to dismantle Nazi operations and ultimately search for their missing father. Just like the past two mainline entries to the Wolfenstein series, Youngblood features an engaging plotline, with unique characters, jokes, and an interesting premise. However, there is a noticeable drop-off in the quality of the storytelling, with far fewer cutscenes and a pretty straightforward, predictable plotline. The actual voice actor performances also aren't that great. The idea here was to have two immature teenage girls who are just goofing around and don't seem to understand the gravity of the situation. But the snorting laughs and awkwardness is a bit overkill, and it really feels out of place considering the context of what's happening. I do like the camaraderie between these two sisters, but it just feels forced, and having more heartfelt moments and situations that put the two sisters at odds with each other would help to greatly expand on the experience. The fact that these characters never seem to develop or distinguish themselves from each other is disappointing, especially considering how great Machine Games have been with their narrative and character design in the past. Thankfully, the gameplay is just as fun as ever, with excellent level designs, solid combat mechanics, and a few new tweaks to help balance the experience with a second player. First, let's talk about the level designs. Unlike the past few games, Wolfenstein Youngblood's levels are primarily open-ended sandboxes, filled with winding streets and interconnected apartment complexes and alleyways. The environments feature much more verticality than before, and I often found elevated routes to bypass enemies stealthily along with plenty of secret rooms and shortcuts. The design seems to draw a ton of inspiration from Dishonored's city of Dunwall, which comes as no surprise as Arkane Studio is responsible for the more open-ended areas in the game. The environment is split into several decently sized districts, all with their own unique visual style and challenges. Players will need to acquire mission objectives from Abby and the various French resistance members in the catacombs, and then fast travel to the respective districts via a metro system to complete simple objectives, often involving clearing a checkpoint or assassinating a key target. Upon completing these objectives, the player is awarded with some XP, coin, and occasionally valuable intel and opportunities to help advance the story. The main goal in Youngblood is to complete missions to level up your character and then take on the more challenging Brother Towers, located in each of the three districts. Completing each of these three towers will help progress the storyline into the final act, where the game will return to a more linear approach. It's not necessarily a long game, but the leveling up process helps to lengthen the experience without ever feeling like a real grind. Youngblood plays a lot like the past three entries in the series, with identical controls and mostly the same feel to the movement and gunplay. However, because we're now controlling BJ's teenage daughters, their abilities are slightly different, favoring more maneuverability over brute strength. Players can no longer dual-wield large weapons, for example, including the shotguns and assault rifles, though they can still dual-wield smaller firearms like the pistols. To make up for this lack of strength, the two girls move faster and can double jump to reach even higher platforms, greatly increasing the verticality of the combat. I found myself often jumping off of objects in the environment, shooting enemies in midair, sliding across the floor, and stealing an enemy's weapon with a slick takedown animation. The combat feels excellent and is only slowed down by the new artificial weapon efficiency system. This system makes it so different weapons are only efficient against certain targets. Light SMGs, for example, are more useful against lightly armored enemies, while heavy assault rifles are more useful against robots and super soldiers. This new design requires players to think carefully about which weapons they use and how they approach combat. But the limited arsenal of heavy weapons really seems to hurt the flow of the combat, especially in the later stages. The only effective weapons for dealing with heavily armored targets are the assault rifle and the laser craftwork, both of which can be drained of ammunition very quickly. You can still use other weapons, but they'll deal significantly less damage and will turn fights into long, tedious grinds. Youngblood also introduces health bars to enemies, with higher level enemies featuring more health and increased resistance to your bullets. This will likely be problematic to longtime fans of the series, as it can be frustrating to land a headshot on an enemy and not get an instant, satisfying kill. Though I did find it to be far less intrusive than other first-person shooter titles that share the same design philosophy, and thankfully, takedowns and most thrown knife attacks can effectively dispatch targets without a problem. The co-op is easily the biggest selling point of Youngblood, and for the most part, it's handled very well. Players can play the entire experience together, including cutscenes, which can be easily skipped if both players agree to it. Most enemy engagements are designed to account for 2 players, meaning you'll often run into challenging configurations of enemies, including several super soldiers, flamethrowers, and of course, the classic Panzerhunds. Since these enemies typically only target one player at a time, it's a good idea to flank them from both sides, targeting weak points on larger enemies and taking advantage of mounted weapons whenever possible. This becomes especially important when dealing with the much larger mechs and bosses, as weak points will greatly weaken targets and help you conserve ammunition. If a player is downed in combat, they'll enter an injured state, giving the other player a chance to revive. If you fail to revive a teammate, it will cost 1 of 3 shared lives, which can be replenished by opening shared life crates hidden throughout the world. If a team of players dies completely, then they'll reload from a nearby checkpoint, with reset enemies and, for whatever reason, ammunition that will not replenish. This can make some of the late game bosses incredibly difficult, especially on the more challenging difficulties. So again, make sure to conserve your ammunition and use the appropriate weapon for your enemies. Youngblood also features an extensive customization system for both the player character abilities and the available firearms. Using earned skill points, players can unlock new powerful abilities for their character, including the ability to turn invisible, smash through walls, and improvements to physical attributes like health and armor. Players can also improve the effectiveness of their PEP callout, which can be activated after brief cooldowns to instantly grant either armor or health to your teammate. All these upgrades are essential in taking down the Brother Towers, and after reaching certain level milestones, new abilities will be made available to purchase. Weapons can also be tweaked using earned currency found in the environment. Each weapon has different sets of attachments that can be equipped, with complete sets offering extra bonuses. Attachments like receivers, magazines, and scopes all round out the customization for weapons, and can even be improved upon for increased effectiveness. While an interesting system, I did find it to be a bit tedious to swap between various attachments throughout missions, like attaching suppressors or long-range scopes. It would have been interesting to see this more seamlessly implemented into the gameplay, especially considering that there's absolutely no way to pause the action, even when playing alone in single player. Youngblood does feature microtransactions. However, the gold currency that you can buy is only applied to cosmetic items like character outfits and weapon skins. All weapon attachments and player abilities must be unlocked through actual gameplay, and I never felt that I was forced to grind for any particular ability to progress through the game. Finally, let's talk about the visual presentation. Wolfenstein Youngblood, like its predecessor, utilizes the id Tech 6 engine, which allows for some gorgeous volumetric lighting, along with some buttery smooth performance and solid texture streaming. The streets of Paris look amazing, and are probably one of the most aesthetically pleasing locales that the series has ever featured. Environments are more fun to explore, and the increased verticality plus the random enemy placement really helps add a nice level of replay value to each area. However, I did run into a few minor bugs, mainly with how the spawn systems work. Occasionally, enemies would spawn directly on top of me, especially when Abby would call in to notify me of a nearby optional mission to complete. Other times, I had enemies continuously respawn on top of me after I triggered an alarm, rather than spawning out of view in some inaccessible door far away. Another minor gripe is how loading is handled. In order to break up the larger environments, subsections of each district are split up by brief door opening sequences, where the 2 players will work together to open a door and have it slam shut behind them. This is likely done to help minimize the performance impact of such a large world, but it does seem frequent enough that it hurts the pacing slightly, and constantly needing to wait around for an AI character to flip the switch or open the door can sometimes take a while. I even ran into an issue where a button that was supposed to lower a platform to proceed through the stage lost its functionality, and without any way to reload from a checkpoint, I was forced to find an alternate, unintentional method for reaching the next ledge. Still, these are all minor gripes. The presentation is still very solid, and I rarely ran into any genuinely game-breaking issues. Overall, Wolfenstein Youngblood is a solid cooperative standalone expansion for Wolfenstein 2. Yes, there are some odd design choices like the unnecessary RPG elements and the overly dorky sister characters, but as a standalone game by itself, it's very well realized and a joy to play. I love how fluid the combat is, and how much more freedom is allowed thanks to the larger level designs. While I played most of the game alone with an AI companion, this game is definitely even more fun when played with a friend, which is made even easier by the Buddy Pass system that allows players to join you even if they don't own the game. If you enjoyed Wolfenstein 2 and are looking for a fun cooperative game to pass the time, then I highly recommend checking out this game. But what do you guys think? Are you interested in Wolfenstein Youngblood? Let me know in the comments section. Also, if you want to learn more about Wolfenstein, don't forget to check out my full documentary on the series that explains how this nearly 40-year-old game franchise got to this point. And don't forget to like and subscribe for more videos posted every week.